Canada is taking action against coal. In a statement today, Canadian Environment Minister Catherine McKenna said the goal is to make 90% of Canadian electricity non-emitting by 2030. Canada's plan to phase out coal-fired power contrasts deeply with President-elect Donald Trump's pledge to revive the industry. Joining us now for more on this story on set in New York is Bloomberg TV Canada anchor Amanda Lang. So it's great to have you, first of all,
Thanks.
in New York again, Amanda. Thank you. Was today's announcement a surprise, or were Canadians expecting it?
In some ways a surprise because it's an acceleration of what the government has already signaled. The Canadian government has a firm commitment to greenhouse gas targets and reductions in emissions, but the timeline here has changed. Now, there are a couple of things inside this announcement that are also a bit of a surprise. This is the equivalent of taking 1.3 million cars off the road, but there's a bit of a break in some ways for coal-fired plants, and that is if the plants use either a scrubber and or carbon capture storage, they are basically exempt from this plan. So it gives some of the provinces in Canada time to get their act together. The other thing that the government is doing is offering a little bit of time in order to allow the plants to shift the electricity producers from coal to natural gas, which is the sort of most easy, obvious route, straight over to renewables or alternative energy. So a little bit of buying time in order to try to persuade into entirely new industries.
The U.S. political campaign is still fresh in our minds, and this was very tricky territory for both of these candidates to tread. In Canada, is it the same? Is there some political risk here to setting out this ambitious target?
You know, there will be pushback from a couple of the provinces. In fact, there already are, just in terms of the amount of coordination. The federal government is working to put a carbon tax in place, and some of the provinces are very disturbed by that because of the economic implications. But the biggest province and the biggest economic region in Canada, which is Ontario, has already phased out coal-fired electricity. So it did it at some cost. Electricity prices in that province are much higher than they used to be. However, it has shown that you can make the shift to renewables. Canada has the benefit of having a lot of hydroelectric power. So half of our total electric grid is fueled by that renewable resource. The shift, though, into solar and wind and other forms, marine energies, is one that the government is really pushing and backing with new infrastructure spending as well.
Amanda, if NAFTA gets blown up or whatever, anyway, does it almost matter? Because we probably, it'll take a while before we have a new agreement, right? In terms of trade, at least.
Yes, there's so many unknowns around what happens with our trade relationship. And there are things that could happen right away, and in fact already are happening. Even under NAFTA, of course, we saw that things like country of origin labeling on meat or our lumber agreements could be affected. In this case, we actually do, in some parts of our country, import energy, of course, from the U.S., particularly in the East, and of course we export as well to the U.S. It's unlikely that those are sectors that would be affected by any changes in NAFTA. And in fact, as we all know, if NAFTA itself, the North American Free Trade Agreement, is ripped up, we may revert to the Free Trade Agreement, which predated it, which for Canada would be okay. There's a lot in there that protects us in any event. But it's the uncertainty, right? And we've seen that in coal-producing stocks as well, because they've gone on a bit of a wild ride. Because Donald Trump is pro-coal, in our country, the coal producers had been seen as sort of, exporting to China being their best bet. And now this is giving a bit of a shot in the arm to some of those companies. So Westmoreland is one, Teck is another, and you can see that they've actually been fairly good performers, and we get a little bit of certainty here around just what their future looks like. You're looking at Westmoreland there, you see a big jump. Teck's been a great performer all year, in fact.
You'll forgive me for making one last parallel here to the U.S. It strikes me that a lot of the conversation about coal has to do with people who are out of work because coal has gone away. Is the government doing anything to perhaps teach new skills to those who would have worked in the coal industry before in Canada?
So the big push, of course, is, and this is again, as with the U.S., there are very specific regions that produce coal. And so when those regions see one industry shut down, it's very difficult, which is why it became so political saleable for Donald Trump. In Canada, the provinces that produce coal are more diverse, so it doesn't have the same direct effect. There is a big push, though, to move people into renewable. One of our federal government's stated goals is to make Canada, from now we're a fossil fuel power, make us a renewable fuel power and exporter of technology. So this is one step in that direction.
There you go.